delay, because your own law says you must give it within 2 years. You understand? So that unnecessary delay is defined by your own law.
So if we take more than 2 years in that case,
yeah, then you have to substitute. You have to adjust the patent protection.
So it will be
compensate.
More than 20 years.
You add another maybe 2 years or 5 years or whatever time you have taken. They call it patent term adjustment.
What if we choose not to approve that drug, for example?
Oh, that's okay. But you must have valid reason, huh? Because if a drug company or even a generic producer comes and then he's got all the ingredients, everything, on what grounds are you going to reject it? Okay? Because our law provides for protection. Okay?
My name is Ryan Norman from CMB. Can I just ask how the TPPA would affect the financial services industry, if any?
Can we go through all these chapters first? Yeah? You in a rush?
No.
Okay. Labor. A lot of people were worried that the labor chapter means opening up the floodgates for foreign workers. Let me give you the assurance, no. That's not what the labor chapter is all about. The labor chapter is basically about maintaining standards in the labor chapter for labor sector and ensuring the rights of workers are protected. Okay? And this is again standards not proposed by the Americans or the Japanese or the Australians. These are all under the ILO Declaration 1998. It is not even conventions. ILO conventions are more onerous. They are not asking us to go and ratify the ILO conventions. All they are saying is we signed the ILO Declaration 1998 and these are the elements that we have to adopt and maintain in our laws. So we have to do a lot of policy change here because currently there's a lot of discretion given to the to the trade union DG, for instance. Okay? So we will have to, for instance, in some of these areas, right to strike. So we have to give them the right to strike, unions. Okay? So we have to write laws. But of course, we will have some conditions. We even have to allow foreign workers to hold office in unions. Okay? So these are things that are enshrined in the ILO. And we are ILO member for a long time. Okay? So this is good for workers. Of course, if you're an employer, you say, oh, it's going to raise prices. Okay? How many of you are employers here? No. You are all workers, right? So must be good for you, no?
Therefore, I'm actually intrigued by point 4, eliminate employment discrimination. Yeah.
Employment discrimination here means, you know, you discriminate, you say, oh, women cannot work, okay, in this. Oh.
Because in the context of, for example, the UK, they will say that employment discrimination is irrespective of race, religious, gender, class, whatever. You know, you can't even tick in the form where they can't even discriminate. So in the context of Malaysia, we still have got, you know, things that we are protecting. So how will that negate against, I mean, that would, you know, coincide with this elimination? So have you got exclusion clauses that you all have worked around that?
No. These are things, no, these are things, look, these are things that we have signed on to in 1998. We are supposed to follow this. And remember, this is a trade agreement, okay? So whatever that is violated here, it has to be in conjunction with trade and investment. I'm a civil servant. I got QPAX. You heard of QPAX? Okay. So if QPAX violates this, we can always argue that We got nothing to do with trade. Okay? So that's the difference. Okay? What the objective of IL, the labor and the environment chapter, is that don't pursue your trade and investment goals and objectives at the expense of lowering standards in environment and labor. That's the gist of the objectives. Okay? Yeah. So it's good for us. The next generation will have good environmental standards. Okay? And workers will be protected. Okay? Never know, huh? Today you're a worker, tomorrow you'll be an employer. Too bad, you still have to make sure that workers are given the rights. Okay? Alright? Now, the agreement is not all about liberalization, rules and disciplines, okay? We also are quite sympathetic towards capacity building, okay? So we have got cooperation chapters, we've got an SME dedicated chapter, okay? And these are all, of course, non-dispute settlement chapters, okay? Nothing to do with dispute settlement, you can't have recourse. But these are all an effort by the 12 parties to ensure that when we open up, when we liberalize, we must make sure that parties can all enjoy the benefits, and that's why we build capacity collectively. Okay, and this is one agreement where we have a dedicated SME chapter. Okay, and all the TPP countries are obliged to create a website that would tell all the other SMEs what are the requirements if you want to do business, what are the opportunities that are available. And we will have a committee established to look at capacity building. Okay. Now the TPP brings a lot of good governance. Labor standards, these are all international standards, labor, environment. Now if we don't follow all this, it's a matter of time our manufacturers feel the need to do that, because the marketplace today looks for international standards on environment, labor, and many others. Okay. Now there's also anti-corruption provisions in the TPP, transparency obligations. Okay. So these are all leading towards good governance. Okay. And I think good governance today is an asset. Yeah.
But a lot of GLCs are exempted.
A lot of GLCs are exempted?
Yeah, from one previous slide, you said that a lot of state-owned enterprises were exempted.
They are exempted from the disciplines of the state-owned enterprise chapter, but not transparency obligations. Okay? You follow? Those were specific, the two specific obligations: commercial consideration, discrimination, and then the other one was on use of non-commercial assistance. Okay? But transparency is something that will cut across all the chapters. Okay?
So this will mean that it's the way we do business then.
Yeah. Good governance, they say. Okay? Yeah.
For the labor part, right, where we have to adopt the international standards, I believe that most companies in Malaysia don't really adopt the international standards, especially in terms of health regulations and safety and stuff. But then, will there be like a special committees doing that adoption to international standards? And then, what will happen if the companies in Malaysia, for example, they don't apply the international standards? Will that affect anything to the country itself, or will be, yeah?
There is a provision in the labor chapter. If you violate the labor chapter provisions, you can actually be subjected to the dispute settlement. For instance, a company that is aggrieved because you have not been conforming to the labor chapter provisions, then that company can actually complain to their government, and then there will be a state-to-state dispute settlement. But as far as I can recall, there's not been many disputes actually that have gone to the dispute settlement stage. Most of it were settled at the consultation stage, dialogue. Okay? So we have this step-by-step approach for dispute settlement in the TPP. Okay? We don't want everything to be escalated into a dispute settlement. It's costly for disputes to be settled that way, you know. So we try to settle it at the consultation stage. But you're right, you know. If an investor or a company is aggrieved, they have recourse. You know, some of these provisions are actually not new to us. We've got laws today, you know. We've got labor laws, you know, the things that you're saying. Like you said, enforcement. We don't enforce it, you see.
So,
But you know why we don't enforce it? Because in the ILO, there is no recourse for dispute settlement. They say ILO has got no teeth. But once it becomes a binding obligation in an international agreement like this, where you can be subjected to dispute, then you think twice about enforcement.
so who will be doing the enforcement? Is it the country itself, or?
Of course, we have to ensure. We have to ensure that whatever laws that we have to implement and enforce it. Okay? Where was I? Governance. Okay. It's not all rosy, yeah? We have signed the agreement. Okay? It's not going to be easy. There are implementation challenges. And one of them is this. Okay? Let's look. Policy changes, labor, IPRGP, these are the major areas where we actually have to do something new. Okay? Adhering to treaty obligations. Tariff reductions we got to do, other measures, services liberalization, rules and disciplines, all these are adherence to treaty obligations. If you don't, then the aggrieved party can always take you to a dispute. Okay. Fulfilling transparency obligations. You know, this is an area which is very, I would say, badly implemented in Malaysia, even in the WTO. A lot of notification obligations were never fulfilled. So these are for purposes of transparency. Okay. Today we have transparency obligations even without the TPP. We've got what we call these good regulatory practices. Before a law or regulation is reviewed or introduced, we have an obligation to put it up on the net and give everybody an opportunity to comment. This is what we call good regulatory practices. Okay? This is transparency. Okay? More opportunities for people to be engaged in rulemaking. Okay? So this is part of regulatory coherence. Okay? So these are things that we are already doing. So the TPP is just going to make this something complementary to what we are already doing. Okay? And if we can do this for all the different ministries, right now I think there are about 6 ministries on a pilot basis that have started. And eventually the goal is to get all these ministries to do this. Okay? Sub-federal level obligations. Like I said, many state requirements have been exempted or carved out. But certain things, even if it's a federal law, it is implemented at the federal level. Environmental laws, for instance. Okay, CITES. Are you familiar with CITES?
Yes.
CITES is international treaty that governs trade in flora and fauna, you know, and endangered species. Okay, it's a federal law. Government has committed to it, but the implementation is normally at the state level, because that's where the borders are very porous, you know, smuggling takes place. Okay, so we have to ensure that the sub-federal level obligations are implemented, because even though you are a state, they will, in an international treaty, they will not sue the state. they will sue the federal government. So the federal government has to ensure that the states comply with the obligations. Okay? Now we got to avoid transshipment and circumvention. You know why this is important? Because in the 12 countries in the TPP, we enjoy the benefits among the 12. So non-parties will try to free ride. Okay, I produce this, I sell to the Americans, I get zero duty treatment. But China is paying 30% for this. So they will try to come through Malaysia and go to the US. We call this transshipment, okay, or circumvention. Okay, so we have to make sure that we avoid this. Okay, otherwise we lose all the benefits. Enforcement and monitoring is one of the major problems. Okay. Now, what are the other challenges we have? Of course, that's from the government side, huh? The implementer side. We have to ensure all this. Some ministries, agencies have already indicated that they need additional resources. So before implementation, we will make sure that these resources are made available. Okay. Now, we have no more tariffs to protect industries, so they have to be more competitive. Okay? Local companies will have to increase their productivity and their costs to be lowered, okay, in order to be competitive, not only in the Malaysian market but also outside. Because don't forget, we've got competitors in the TPP like Vietnam. Vietnam today has not only signed the TPP, they've also signed the EU FTA.
That's right.
Okay, so they are better off than us. They are getting access later on in the TPP, and they are also getting preferential access to the EU. Okay, and they have in many areas surpassed a lot of countries. Although at one time Vietnam was, they call it CLMV, you know. They are the second batch of countries that joined ASEAN. We used to give them preferential treatment for tariffs. Now, they are taking on heavier obligations than Malaysia is, okay, in negotiations like this. Alright, standards. I think this is another area that we have to oblige, like you said just now, labor standards, environment standards. Okay, services region could lead to inflow of service providers. So all this, you see, may actually lead to better offerings for consumers like you and me. You have better choice, maybe more price competitive, quality, okay? So competition is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? Now let me just give you a little bit. Those are the chapters that were of controversy back home. Okay, I thought I would highlight all those and explain to you some of those issues. Okay. Now, this is the conditions for entry into force. We've got 24 months for the 12 countries to ratify. Then the agreement comes into force. Now, if that doesn't happen, then they will look if there are 6 countries, at least 6 countries, accounting for 85% of the GDP of all the 12. Okay? Is that clear? Then the agreement will enter into force. Now, if that still doesn't happen, then we will wait until such time, at least 6 countries accounting for 85% of GDP, then the agreement will enter into force. Okay? So what it means here is the US and Japan are very important because they will account for the bulk of this 85%. And the negotiations went on like that because all the countries in the TPP want to have the US in it because they see the US as an important market, goods and services, as well as a source of investment, technology, and so on. Because most of the other countries have got already agreements among ourselves, except the US. We don't have with US, Brunei, Vietnam, Japan, New Zealand. All these don't have agreements with the US. Okay. All right. Now what?
Back to the slides. The year, is it correct? 2013 or the signatories in 2013?
Okay, maybe the language here is bad. What I'm saying here is 85% of the combined GDP in 2013. So that's the base year. Okay? So the base year is 2013. We calculate the GDP of the 12 in 2013. Okay? The comma missing somewhere. English students can correct that. Okay? Alright. So we are looking at the earliest possible date that the agreement can enter into force is 2018. Okay? If all 12 countries sign on to it. Okay? Right? Now what if we do not join the TPP? You can see that we're going to lose access to a market of 800 million people. 800 million people is not big, huh? Compared to the other negotiations that's going on currently. RCEP, have you heard of RCEP? Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, 16 countries, China, India. It's a huge market, 3 billion. But here the GDP is US 27 trillion. Okay? And I think it accounts for about 1/3 of global trade. And then we've got Vietnam and Singapore that is going to take advantage. Okay? And we have also heard from Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, Philippines and Thailand. The 3 ASEAN countries earlier were non-committal. Some even said, no, we will not join the TPP. But after the agreement was concluded, suddenly they are interested. And Indonesia, the president 2 days ago said that it is a matter of time before they join. It is no more a question of whether they will or not. Okay? So they are really serious. And Korea and Taiwan has already made a lot of engagements with the current 12, expressing their interest and readiness to join. Okay? So if we are not and these countries are in, we are going to be severely disadvantaged. Okay? So why do we join the TPPA? 4 new preferential markets. We do not have FTAs with the US, Canada, Mexico, Peru. So in one single negotiations we are creating preferential access to 4 new markets. Okay? The investment argument, not only to attract FDI but to preserve existing investors. It's very important. A lot of our people who have invested in Malaysia are thinking whether they should move out or not. And if we now don't join the TPP, it gives them added reason and argument to move out. Okay? Now international standards, these are good things that we have to do, good governance. We have negotiated rules that have addressed our key concerns, SOEs, even halal. We have excluded halal from the SPS chapter. Okay? Now sensitive issues have got safeguards, transitions. Now when we joined the TPP, we only confirmed that we are business friendly, environmental friendly, labor friendly. Now if we don't, we are sending the opposite signals. We're telling the whole world we cannot negotiate high quality agreements. What we negotiate in the TPP is what the EU will also want to negotiate. And the EU accounts for at least about 12% of our global trade. The US accounts for about 9%. Okay? So the EU is watching us. We don't go into the TPP, they know that we have difficulties negotiating with them. When Vietnam, a country which is supposed to be far below us, has already shown that they are willing to take on international standards, high quality agreements. Okay? What's the current status? We have signed, now we are doing our due process domestically. We are getting ready to do all the changes to the laws. We've got about 20 laws to amend, not new laws. Okay? And we're doing a lot of outreach, engaging our stakeholders, building a lot of capacity so that people will be ready to benefit from the agreement once it is implemented. So that, ladies and gentlemen, I finish my presentation. And I hope it's been worth your while staying on.
Dato', I have a comment to make, if I may. What I see is that the TPP